Now let me talk to you for a minute, especially my ladies, because this right here might save you years of confusion, stress, and wasted tears. If he's pulling away, if you feel that energy shift, if the calls slow down, the texts feel dry, and your spirit is uneasy, listen to me closely. Do not panic. Do not chase. Do not start explaining yourself like you did something wrong. See, most women make one mistake when a man pulls away. They try to fix it with effort. More love, more calls, more patience, more understanding. But let me tell you something about men. Effort does not pull a man back. Absence does. When a man starts pulling away, it's because he's comfortable. Comfortable with your availability. Comfortable with your forgiveness. Comfortable knowing you'll still be there no matter how little he gives. And comfort does not inspire commitment. Pressure doesn't either. But loss will wake a man up real quick. When a man starts pulling away, the instinct for most women is to move closer. You call more. You text longer. You explain your feelings again and again, hoping clarity will fix distance. But let me tell you something real. When a man pulls away, chasing him doesn't bring him back. It confirms to him that he can retreat without consequences. Men respond to space very differently than women do. Where a woman seeks connection through communication, a man often processes through distance. And when you invade that distance with panic-driven effort, you remove the very thing that could have made him stop and reflect. Chasing sends a message you don't even realize you're sending. It says, no matter how little you give, I will still show up. It says, my fear of losing you is greater than your fear of losing me. Once that balance shifts, the dynamic changes. He doesn't feel urgency anymore. He doesn't feel pressure to step up. He feels comfortable pulling back because there's no risk involved. And comfort, especially emotional comfort without responsibility, is dangerous in relationships. A man only evaluates his feelings when he feels the possibility of loss. Not imagined loss. Real loss. When you chase, you remove that possibility. You keep reminding him you're still there, still available, still emotionally invested, even while he's doing less. That doesn't inspire commitment. It delays it. He doesn't have to decide because you've decided for him by staying in pursuit. Now, here's the part that's hard to hear but necessary to understand. If a man is truly invested, he does not pull away for long. Life can distract him, stress can slow him down, but interest doesn't disappear quietly. When a man values a woman, distance bothers him. Silence bothers him. He feels the gap and wants to close it. But when he pulls away and you chase, he never has to sit with that discomfort. You cushion him from consequence. Pulling back your energy is not playing games. It's responding with self-respect. It's saying, I notice the shift, and I will not overextend myself to compensate for your lack of effort. That doesn't require an announcement. It doesn't require a speech. It requires discipline. You match energy. You stop initiating every conversation. You stop explaining what he should already be showing. You give him room to either rise or reveal. And here's the truth most people avoid. Some men pull away hoping you'll chase. It feeds their ego. It reassures them of their importance. When you refuse to chase, you interrupt that pattern. Now he has to ask himself real questions. Why is she quiet? Why isn't she reacting? Did I misjudge her availability? That internal dialogue only happens when you stop doing the emotional labor for him. Chasing also drains you. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You start doubting yourself, replaying conversations, wondering what you did wrong, shrinking yourself to fit into his silence. Pulling back protects your peace. It allows you to observe instead of react. And observation gives you clarity. You stop guessing and start seeing. Does he reach out? Does he correct the distance? Does he value you enough to step forward on his own? If he does, then the connection was real and simply needed space to breathe. If he doesn't, then chasing would never have saved it anyway. All chasing does is delay the truth and deepen the hurt. A man who wants you will move toward you when given the chance. A man who doesn't will gladly accept the space and never fill it. Either way, your silence gives you an answer without costing your dignity. So understand this deeply. When he pulls away, doing less is not weakness, it's wisdom. You are not losing control, you are regaining it. You are choosing to value yourself enough to stop forcing what should flow naturally. And the right man will feel that shift immediately because a woman who knows when to step back is a woman who knows her worth. Distance has a way of telling the truth that arguments never will. When something feels off and a man starts pulling away, most women want to confront it immediately. They want to sit him down, talk it through, ask questions, and demand answers. That feels responsible. But here's the problem. Confrontation gives a man something to hide behind: words, excuses, promises, temporary reassurance. Distance takes all of that away and leaves only action. When you confront a man, you give him the opportunity to explain himself without changing anything. He can say he's busy. He can say he's stressed. He can say he doesn't know what he wants right now. And because you care, you listen, you understand, you give him time. But while you're processing his words, you're ignoring the truth of his behavior. Distance doesn't ask questions. Distance watches. A man's intentions show up clearly when you stop filling the space for him. When you stop initiating conversations, stop checking in, stop trying to keep the connection alive by yourself. You remove the safety net. Now he has to decide what he's willing to do without being prompted. And that decision tells you everything you need to know. If he values you, the distance will bother him. He will feel the gap. He will reach out. He will make an effort to restore closeness. If he doesn't, the silence will feel comfortable to him, and that comfort is your answer. Confrontation often keeps women stuck because it creates hope without evidence. A man can say all the right things in a conversation and still do nothing afterward. Distance doesn't allow performance. There's no audience, no emotional appeal, no pressure to respond correctly in the moment. It's just him and his priorities. And people always make time for what matters to them. Another hard truth is this: confrontation can make a man defensive, but distance makes him reflective. When you argue, he focuses on protecting his ego. When you go quiet, he's left alone with his thoughts. That's when realization hits, not during emotional conversations, but during silence. Silence forces him to ask himself whether he's willing to lose access to you. And that question is far more powerful than any demand for clarity. Distance also protects you. When you confront, you risk overexposing your emotions. You explain how much you care, how confused you feel, how afraid you are of losing him. That vulnerability is beautiful, but in the wrong hands, it becomes leverage. Distance keeps your dignity intact. It allows you to step back and observe without begging for reassurance. You're not punishing him. You're giving yourself space to see reality clearly. And let's be honest, if a relationship can only survive constant confrontation, it wasn't stable to begin with. Healthy interest doesn't require repeated talks to stay alive. Consistency doesn't need reminders. Distance reveals whether his effort is natural or forced. If he only shows up after being confronted, then you're managing the relationship alone. What scares people about distance is the loss of control. When you stop confronting, you're no longer steering the situation. You're letting it unfold. And that's uncomfortable. But control is not the same as security. Real security comes from knowing that someone chooses you without being pushed. Distance allows that choice to surface. Some men will step up when given space. Others will fade away. Both outcomes are information. And information is power. You don't need to argue your worth into someone. You don't need to convince a man to show up. Distance quietly separates interest from indifference without draining your energy. So when things shift and you feel him pulling back, resist the urge to confront immediately. Let the space speak. Let his actions answer the questions you're tired of asking. Because distance never lies, it only reveals what was already there. A man's ego is a quiet but powerful force, and when it comes to relationships, it often speaks louder than his words. Many men pull away not because their feelings are gone, but because their ego feels too comfortable. When everything is easily accessible, when your time, attention, and emotional energy are always available, he doesn't have to evaluate his role. He doesn't have to ask himself what he's risking. He simply assumes you'll remain where you are. That assumption is where effort slowly disappears. Men value what they believe they could lose, not because they are heartless, but because ego measures worth through challenge and consequence. When there is no fear of loss, there is no urgency. He may still like you. He may still enjoy your presence. But liking someone and prioritizing someone are very different things. Ego convinces him he has time, options, and control especially when your consistency never changes no matter how his behavior does. This is why pulling back works in a way chasing never will. When you reduce your availability, you disrupt his sense of certainty. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to threaten to leave. You simply stop overgiving. That shift creates a pause in his mind. Suddenly, the attention he took for granted is missing. The emotional safety net is gone. And now his ego has to confront a new possibility, that he could actually lose access to you. At first, ego resists. He may act like he doesn't notice. He may tell himself you're just busy. He may even convince himself he doesn't care. But ego is fragile. It relies on reassurance. And when reassurance disappears, discomfort follows. That discomfort is what forces reflection. He begins replaying interactions, noticing the silence, questioning why things feel different. That internal process is what often leads to action. Here's the part most women misunderstand when you pull back. You're not trying to punish him. You're allowing him to experience reality. Reality is the absence of what he didn't protect. You're not creating fear, you're removing familiarity. And familiarity is what dulls appreciation. When everything feels guaranteed, effort fades. When nothing is guaranteed, value becomes clear. Some men will respond by stepping up. They will reach out, initiate conversations, and make their intentions known. They don't do this because they were manipulated, but because the space revealed what they were about to lose. Others will not respond at all. And while that outcome hurts, it's also honest. Ego only fights for what it truly wants to keep. What's important is that pulling back restores your power. Not power over him, but power over yourself. You stop measuring your worth by his attention. You stop waiting for validation. You stop bending to maintain a connection that's already weakening. Instead, you observe. You gather information. You allow his actions to show you his capacity. Men often respect what they have to earn, not because they enjoy difficulty, but because effort signals value. When you remove effortless access, you redefine the dynamic. You're no longer the one proving your interest. You're the one being considered. And that shift changes how he sees you. Ego can delay action, but it cannot silence fear of loss forever. If he truly cares, the space will push him to move. If he doesn't, the silence will remain, and that silence is clarity. Either way, pulling back protects your dignity and preserves your self-respect. Understanding this changes how you respond when a man pulls away. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond strategically. You allow ego to reveal truth. You let absence do what words never could. And in that stillness, you discover whether he values you enough to step forward without being asked. Absence has a strange power that most people underestimate, especially when it comes to emotionally avoidant men. These are the men who shut down instead of opening up, who retreat instead of explaining, who create distance when emotions get real. Talking to them more doesn't bring them closer. Asking questions doesn't make them reflect. In fact, too much communication often gives them an escape. They stay distracted by your messages, your concerns, your attempts to fix what feels broken. Absence removes that distraction and leaves them alone with themselves. When you are present all the time, emotionally available no matter what, an avoidant man never has to sit with his feelings. He can pull back and still feel secure knowing you're there. He can delay decisions because nothing is forcing him to choose. Your presence cushions him from discomfort. Absence takes that cushion away. Silence creates space, and in that space, reflection begins whether he wants it or not. Avoidant men are experts at avoiding conversations, but they are not immune to loss. They may not express emotions easily, but they still feel the shift when access is removed. When you stop reaching out, stop checking in, stop offering reassurance, something changes internally. At first, they feel relief, less pressure, less expectation, but relief doesn't last. Once the noise fades, the reality sets in. They start noticing what's missing, not in a dramatic way, but quietly, slowly, in moments they didn't expect. Absence forces them to replay memories, your laugh, your support, your consistency, the way you showed up without being asked. These thoughts don't come during arguments or emotional talks. They come during silence, late at night, in between distractions, when there's nothing left to avoid. That's when reflection happens. This is why absence works even on men who claim they don't care. They may not chase immediately. They may not admit anything out loud, but internally they are assessing. Why hasn't she called? Why hasn't she checked on me? Did I misread her availability? These questions only arise when your energy is no longer filling the space. Reflection doesn't need communication. It needs quiet. Another important truth is that absence removes the emotional safety net. When you're always there, an avoidant man can take emotional risks without consequences. He can pull back, go quiet, and return when it suits him. Absence introduces consequence. Not punishment, consequence. The consequence of not nurturing a connection is distance, and distance forces awareness. Absence also exposes emotional capacity. Some avoidant men will reflect and realize they don't want to lose you. They will feel the discomfort and choose growth. They will reach out, not perfectly, but genuinely. Others will stay distant. They will choose comfort over connection. And that outcome, painful as it may be, is still clarity. Reflection doesn't always lead to change, but it always leads to truth. What's powerful about absence is that it shifts the focus back to you. Instead of pouring energy into someone who is emotionally unavailable, you reclaim your time, your peace, your self-respect. You stop trying to pull emotions out of someone who isn't ready to give them. That alone changes how you show up. Calmer, less reactive, more grounded. Avoidant men are used to controlling emotional distance. Absence flips that dynamic. Now they are the ones feeling the gap. Now they are the ones left to wonder. And wondering leads to reflection. Reflection leads to decisions. Silence accelerates what words delay. Absence doesn't guarantee he will come back. And that's the point. It guarantees that whatever happens next is real. No forced conversations. No emotional bargaining, just truth revealed through behavior. And when absence is chosen from self-respect rather than fear, it becomes one of the most powerful responses to emotional withdrawal there is. Pride is one of the strongest forces standing between a man and action. It convinces him that reaching out first makes him weak, that admitting confusion makes him vulnerable, that changing behavior feels like losing control. When a man pulls away, pride often tells him to stay distant, to wait, to see how long things can go without him making a move. Pride whispers that if you care, you'll come back on your own. And for a while, pride wins. In the beginning, pride gives him confidence. He tells himself he's fine. He assumes you'll reach out. He believes the connection is still there, just paused. This is why many men don't react immediately when a woman pulls back. Pride creates a false sense of security. It tells him he still has access, even when he doesn't. It delays urgency. It postpones effort. But pride has a weakness. It cannot compete with the fear of loss forever. Pride is loud at first, but fear is patient. As time passes and your absence remains steady, something shifts. The reassurance pride relied on disappears. The messages don't come. The check-ins stop. The emotional availability he counted on is gone. And now pride has nothing to stand on. That's when fear begins to speak. Quietly at first. He wonders why you haven't reached out. He starts checking his phone more often. He replays the last conversations, trying to find the moment things changed. Pride tries to explain it away, but fear asks a deeper question. What if she's actually gone? That question changes everything. Fear of loss hits a man differently than emotional pressure ever could. Pressure makes him defensive. Fear makes him honest. When a man realizes he might lose something valuable, pride starts losing its grip. He feels the absence in real ways. Not just emotionally, but mentally and physically. The routines you were part of feel empty. The support you offered feels missing. The presence he assumed would always be there no longer is. This is why pulling back with consistency is powerful. Inconsistent silence confuses him. Consistent absence forces reality. Pride depends on uncertainty. Fear thrives on clarity. When your absence becomes undeniable, fear has space to grow. And fear demands action. Some men respond by reaching out cautiously, testing the waters. Others come back with intensity, suddenly expressive, suddenly clear. This isn't manipulation, it's realization. The fear of losing access to you has finally outweighed the pride that kept him distant. And when that balance shifts, behavior changes. But here's the most important part. Not all men act even when fear shows up. Some men let pride win all the way to the end. They choose ego over effort, comfort over connection. And while that hurts, it also reveals truth. A man who allows pride to cost him a meaningful connection is not emotionally ready to sustain one. What pulling back does is remove your role in managing his pride. You stop being the one who softens the silence, who reassures him, who makes it easier for him to stay distant. You allow pride and fear to battle it out without interference. And whichever one wins tells you everything you need to know about his emotional capacity. If fear of loss moves him to action, you see it clearly. If pride keeps him frozen, you see that too. Either outcome saves you from guessing. You no longer have to interpret mixed signals or wonder where you stand. His response to your absence becomes the answer. Pride delays action, but it cannot silence fear forever. And when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop overgiving, you allow that truth to surface naturally. You're not forcing a decision, you're allowing one. And that decision, whatever it is, brings clarity, dignity, and self-respect back into your hands. A man who is right for you does not disappear when space is introduced. He reveals himself. That's the truth most people learn the hard way. Space does not create interest or destroy it. It exposes what was already there. When you stop chasing, stop initiating, stop holding the connection together by yourself, you are not testing him. You are giving him the opportunity to choose. And choice is everything. Effort is not something that needs to be taught to the right man. It may not always be perfect, but it will be present. When space appears, a man who genuinely cares feels it immediately. He notices the change in energy. He senses the shift. He doesn't need an explanation to understand that something is different. And instead of withdrawing further, he moves closer. He checks in. He asks questions. He seeks clarity through action, not excuses. The wrong man reacts to space with indifference. The right man reacts with intention. That difference matters more than words ever could. Anyone can say they care when confronted. Anyone can promise change during emotional conversations. But effort in silence is honest. When no one is reminding him, pushing him, or guiding him, his natural behavior emerges. And natural behavior is the most reliable indicator of how someone feels. Space gives a man room to step up without pressure. Pressure makes effort feel forced. Space allows it to be chosen. When you pull back, you're no longer prompting him to show interest. You're allowing him to decide whether he wants to pursue you on his own. And men pursue what they value, not what they're handed, not what's guaranteed, but what feels meaningful enough to protect. A man who is right for you understands that connection requires maintenance. He doesn't wait for you to disappear completely before noticing. He senses distance early and addresses it, not with defensiveness, not with confusion, but with presence. He makes time. He communicates. He restores balance because he doesn't want to lose the connection. That instinct cannot be manufactured. It exists or it doesn't. Space also reveals emotional maturity. A mature man does not punish you for pulling back. He doesn't accuse you of playing games. He doesn't retreat further out of pride. Instead, he becomes curious. He reflects. He takes responsibility for his part. Effort from this place feels grounded, not reactive. It feels steady, not dramatic. And steady effort is what sustains real relationships. The absence of effort, on the other hand, tells a clear story. If space makes him vanish, if he becomes comfortable with silence, if he allows distance to grow without concern, then effort was never going to come consistently anyway. You were carrying the connection. You were filling the gaps. Space simply removed your labor and exposed the imbalance. What's important is that space protects you from over-investing in potential. It shifts the focus from what he might do to what he actually does. You stop analyzing mixed signals and start observing patterns. You stop hoping effort will appear and start seeing whether it exists. That clarity is powerful. The right man doesn't fear space because he doesn't rely on constant access to feel secure. He relies on connection, and connection motivates action. He understands that relationships require initiative, not reminders. So when you step back, he steps forward, not because he's afraid, but because he cares. This is why giving space is not risky when it's done from self-respect. You are not pushing someone away who belongs with you. You are allowing the truth to surface. The man who responds with effort shows you he values you. The man who doesn't shows you that he never intended to meet you at the level you deserve. And that's the power of space. It doesn't confuse the right man, it activates him.